Home life. Margaret Sinclair was the third child of Andrew Sinclair, an honest labourer, and of Elizabeth Kelly, his wife, being born on Thursday, 29th of March, 1900, at 9 in the evening. They were staying then at 24 Middle Arthur Place, in the flat below the ground floor, in the middle house of the right lobby, both neighbours being Jews. This part of the town was at one time a centre of high social life, but now it was mainly inhabited by artisans and labourers. The family soon went to live at 13 Blackfriars Street, also in the parish of St. Patrick, not far from the church. The place had been hallowed in times long past, before the desecrations committed by the Protestants, by holy monks celebrating the divine mysteries. It was in this neighbourhood also that John Knox uttered his impious blasphemies against the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the divine presence on our altars, and it must have been a great source of joy to the thoughtful child Margaret to see that divine presence still continued and worshipped in that very place, and within a stone's throw of her window. When Margaret came of school age, she was sent to the Catholic school of St. Anne, in charge of the Sisters of Mercy, who, however, remember no more of her than that she gave no trouble and was always attentive and ready to help. She was a quiet, painstaking, well-behaved child, writes one of her teachers, and always seemed anxious to get on. The great thing is, I do not remember anything bad about her. She worked hard and gave no trouble. The story is told how on one occasion Margaret was held up as an example to the others. She had come to Sunday school minus dinner. Yet another teacher remembers perfectly a pale-faced, large-eyed little mouse with a sweet expression. Apparently Margaret was successful in winning prizes at running and swimming competitions. She obtained certificates in sewing, cooking, and dressmaking at the Athol Crescent School of Domestic Economy, Edinburgh. Her companions recall her jolly and bright, full of fun, a bit of a sport. Suddenly, however, some time after she left school, she became very reserved, gradually dropped friends, and made a companion of her sister only. Margaret was not gifted intellectually beyond the average girl of her age and circumstances of life. There are a number of small coloured paintings of hers, a scene of Loch Lomond, some flowers, the apparition at Lourdes, etc., which are a credit to her, considering her total lack of training and the crude colours she had to use. Her letters and jottings are grammatically incorrect, and even misspelt sometimes, but they certainly show a depth of thought and an understanding of the mysteries of our holy faith which surpass the average of even educated girls of her age. At home, Margaret was always cheerful and smiling. She was quiet in argument, and when she thought that principles of faith were at stake, or when there was negligence of obvious duties, she would coax the culprit and win him over by persuasion without bickering or nagging, or casting up old faults against the offender. Sometimes a look was enough. Even Pete admitted to the priest that she had a way of looking at you straight which deterred the most resolute, and a smile which soothed those who were bitter. No doubt her willingness to help was at times abused. She would smile then and do what she was expected to perform, even though she reminded them, occasionally, how they had just refused to help her when she needed it. Her brother used to offer her a shilling if she would not smile just that once, but she would laugh him out. One thing did worry Margaret at home. She had told the priest that her mother was subject to fits of depression. Mrs. Sinclair wishes the priest to put on record that she was tempted to give way, Margaret would kneel beside her and plead with her and coax her. "Mother, dinna give in." And when the mother threatened to punish her for her insistence, she would say, "Beat me, mother, do what you like with me, but dinna give way. Dinna give way, mother." If the mother complained of her discomfort and depression, Margaret would promptly urge her to go to confession and Holy Communion to seek comfort from her divine Lord. "And what's the use of going and then starting again? Try again, mother. I'll say a wee prayer for you." As she grew up, her school companions noticed that she became more reserved. Even her own brothers and sisters noticed that she was not boisterous in her merriment. A quiet, hearty, simple laugh and an expression of tender goodwill in her eyes and countenance made her welcome everywhere, even though her conversation always tended to spiritual things. She made no intimate friends. In fact, she was hardly ever seen with anyone but her sister Bella. We have remarked before how Margaret almost shivered at the thought that Pete would accompany them. Children in the poorer quarters of great cities see and hear many things which hurt their sensitive souls, and it requires great steadiness of character not to lose that sensitiveness, if not to be contaminated altogether. Margaret's safety lay in her reserve and obedience to her parents, who would not allow their children to play in the streets or to associate with any but good Catholics. They insisted on the girls having a room for themselves, even though it cost them severe sacrifices to keep up a 3-roomed house. Her faithfulness to daily prayer and communion preserved her innocence and protected her from vile seducers. She learned to make Jesus tabernacled her friend, and he would never forsake her. Her sister Bella relates how, one day, when Margaret was still at school, a little boy about her own age ran after her when she was coming up the house with a parcel, and caught hold of her arm and said, "Oh, my little darling." Of course Margaret was highly insulted for him to dare say such a thing, so she came indoors, put the parcel on the table, and went out again. She was not a minute out till she came in again and said, "Now then," and she was all out of breath. So her mother asked what was the matter, and she said, "He won't say that to me again, for I have given him a good lesson." Of course, when she told the story, we were all quite serious, but afterwards we had a good laugh, and father used to joke about it. But she said she felt quite just in doing so, and she was always just in everything, for if she was going to do anything and she thought that it was not quite just, she would not do it. A certain joiner, J.R., tells how one day, while Margaret was working alone in one of the rooms of Mrs. M.V. and P., he entered the room to tell her a vulgar story. Margaret never so much as lifted up her eyes from her work all the time he was in the room, until he withdrew discomfited and ashamed of himself. Still, he tried a second time within a few days, and he saw her busy at her work with prayer book and beads close by her. He withdrew in haste, struck dumb, and he told his fellow workers not to approach that room, for she was a holy girl. Every week Margaret used to go with her sister Bella to the sewing class at Drummond Place, held by the helpers of the Holy Souls. She is still remembered by the girls and the sisters as a quiet, cheerful girl, always ready to help things on. Margaret was always very simple, open, and modest. When she came to help us to mend the altar linen of the cathedral, she never chose the easiest work, but was ready for anything we gave her, and humbly allowed herself to be shown how to do it. Margaret always held herself in the background. Whenever asked whether she could do anything, she would answer, "I will try." Wherefore, it is that Bella appeared the brighter of the two. Less gifted and more shy than her sister Bella, she willingly retired in the background. When the talk came upon her family life, she spoke rather of what Bella did there than of herself. The gentleness and the affection of the two sisters for each other were very edifying. Margaret was very fond of hearing about the life of our Lord and the saints. In fact, we never spoke of anything else when she and her sister were alone with us. Though Margaret had hardly heard about religious life, one could see how much a hidden life spent in prayer and humility had attraction for her. A poor woman whom we had been nursing for a long time and who had known Margaret as a child told us how struck she had always been by the gentleness, the kindness, and altogether the cheerful appearance of Margaret Sinclair. That hunger and thirst for a deeper knowledge of our divine Lord remained with Margaret till the end. She read The Imitation of Christ eagerly, even before she entered the convent, especially the chapters on true love and true friendship with Christ. She loved the New Testament, especially the last chapters of St. John's Gospel. And when the priest, who had known her soul in all its innocence and simplicity, went to see her for a quarter of an hour, she wrote to her abbess that she had been in heaven, for the priest spoke of nothing else but him whom her soul loved and yearned for. The Sister of Charity, too, could not help seeing the wonderful effect this conversation produced in her, and entreated the priest to stay longer when he called for the second and last time.